Welcome to episode 296 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Atlanta-based writer Mark Leidner. He just wrote a cool sci-fi thriller script called Empathy, Inc. He's a great example of a writer living far from Hollywood who's getting movies made. This is his second feature, and he's done it all without an agent or manager, and of course living way, way, way far away from Hollywood. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 296. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing writer Mark Leidner. Here is the interview. Welcome, Mark, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm happy to be here.
So to start out, maybe you can just give us a quick overview of your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
I grew up in South Georgia in a small town called Tifton, and I went to school at the University of Georgia. And then I went to a couple different grad schools in English and creative writing. It took me a very long time to even begin thinking about film. But after grad school, basically I'm an English teacher. And a friend of mine in grad school, we started to go to a lot of movies and review them. And we kind of, like, one year we went to 70 movies in the theater, and that's pretty. I mean, that was a lot for us, and we wrote about all of them. So we would each write a review, and they would kind of be like a Siskel and Ebert type of dynamic.
Was this on a blog? You started a blog or something?
Yeah, it was a blog, and we went to grad school for poetry, so we were writing about film, but from a totally left field, not in industry, just writing for poets and to our friends. And by doing that, I realized I always knew I loved movies, but at some point I was like, here I am judging these movies and, slamming them for not being good, or the writing's bad or the writing's great. And I was like, maybe I could try that. And so I started to just try to write screenplays. This is like in Western Massachusetts. I've never even met anyone who, worked in film. So I answered a Craigslist ad one summer for a guy who wanted to make a short film, and we made a horrible short film. He then called me like 3 years later and said, I'm going to make a feature. Do you want to help me write it? So
I signed me up.
I was like, well, I just finished my second grad school, and now I need something new to do. So we made our first film together, and we learned a lot. None of us had gone to film school, and we were very proud of what we made, given the fact that we were complete outsiders to film. 3 years later, we made a second film.
And that's Empathy, Inc., which we're going to talk about today. So I want to go back just quickly. You I think, somewhat tongue-in-cheek said you made a horrible short. Clearly, that experience was not so... Like, one of my big things on this podcast is encouraging people to just get out there and do stuff like shorts. And don't be afraid to make a horrible short. And I think this is a prime example where it actually did lead to something. Yes, you guys went out there and made a horrible short, but you remained friends, and you both wanted to get better. There was some connection. You must have seen something in him, and he must have seen something in you where there's enough ambition or just trust that, hey, yeah, we made a horrible short, but we can continue to move on with our careers.
That's exactly That's exactly what happened. And my first advice to anybody who wants to make movies or write them is just to try and make it, and know it won't be good. And um, because what we found is that although we our script and our casting process and our shooting, everything imploded. We didn't ever even get close to finishing, but we liked working together. And he was really good at the kind of spreadsheet work that you need to manage. He was our producer, Josh. His name is Josh Iskowitz. And I was good at, like, well, I don't know what to do. Maybe I'll just try to write something. So I could definitely write without fear. And it ended up not being good, but I think that he liked that about me, and I liked what he could do about him. And we got along. So we worked together again later.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so let's move into Empathy Inc. and kind of talk through that project. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick picture or logline. What is that film all about?
Sure, it's a businessman gets an opportunity to invest in a revolutionary virtual reality startup that offers you a virtual reality that is realer than anything anybody's ever seen. He's really desperate to be successful, but he doesn't have any money, so he sinks all his in-laws. He convinces his in-laws to invest in this VR startup, and the promise of the company is that they have really good tech, and they also have a noble intention to allow the rich to experience what it's like to be poor, in order to achieve this kind of pay-as-you-go enlightenment or empathy with people who have less than you. So he invests his in-laws' money in that, and he learns out fairly quickly that what they're up to, what the company he's sunken his in-laws' resources into, is far more nefarious, and the virtual reality isn't really virtual.
I gotcha. So where did this idea come from? What was the genesis of this story?
The director, Yedidia Gorsetman, and I, we knew we wanted to make a second movie, and he was really into a particular kind of movie. I mean, we were just pitching back and forth for about 6 months. We'd come up with 5 ideas, we'd try them off on each other. He really liked movies like Wall Street and The Firm, or The Wolf of Wall Street, movies about a guy who makes a lot of money and then has a fall. He really loves that genre. And I was more of a sci-fi nerd, and I was like, well, I want a time machine. I want something mind-bending. So this movie was kind of, I came up with it because I was trying to come up with a sci-fi plot device that would allow me to get my director really excited to tell a story about a businessman's rise and fall.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm curious too, when you made your first short, did you start to get some feedback, whether it be film festivals, distributors, that maybe impacted you at all in terms of choosing this story? Was there anything business-wise? Because as you pitched that to me, one of the things I hear a lot, especially in the low budget realm, grounded sci-fi is a great genre. It plays well overseas. And so just as you're pitching that, my thought process is that, hey, that's actually a pretty marketable genre for a low budget movie. Everybody thinks horror is the marketable genre, but it's so oversaturated. But an intelligent grounded sci-fi like what you're describing here seems like something that you could find distribution. And I'm curious how much of that impacted you, as opposed to just this thing of getting the director interested.
That's a great question. And it's very astute. The short that I briefly mentioned as bad, that didn't even get to the editing room. But the feature that we made together as a team, me, Josh, and Yedidia, it was a comedy, and it had no stars. And we were proud of what we created, and we were really proud of the cast and the crew and what we did. But it was utterly unmarketable because it's a comedy with no stars. And we had many distributors who we would try to show it to, and they would say, oh, it's a comedy with no stars, we're not interested. I don't even care what the logline is. So maybe a lot of people know that already, but we certainly didn't, because we were not in the business. So from that, the director and I, we were like, whatever we do next is going to have some kind of science fiction, thriller, or horror. We knew we wanted to be in the ballpark of a high stakes genre story. And honestly, we tried a million ways to come up with a horror plot that that both appealed to us, that we felt very confident in. And we came up with some, but this was just our best idea. So we just ended up in Sci-Fi, and I thought, well, it's got high stakes and it's got drama, so it won't be a comedy. And I like sci-fi. I like to Google, top 10 low budget sci-fi movies of 2018 or 2019, and I'll watch all of them because I'm curious and I like those movies. So I was like, well, at least there'll be one person maybe out there like me who will actually buy this if it ever is released.
And a follow-up, the obvious follow-up question to that, give us like one or two of just the best low-budget sci-fi films you've ever seen for our audience, maybe to go and track those down. There must be some that stand out as really excellent low-budget examples.
Okay, so there's the obvious ones like Primer, or Pi. Those were two big kind of reference points for me and Yedidia, the director. And if you even care about low budget sci-fi, I'm sure you've probably seen those maybe multiple times.
Yeah.
So other ones that I really liked, there's this movie called I forget it, but it's like The Oldest Man in the World, or The Man Who Lived, the 10,000-Year-Old Man. It's on Amazon. I'm botching the title, but it's basically about a guy he's been alive since the dawn of time, and he never ages. So every time his friends start to age up and notice that he's not aging, he has to move on because his secret is why he's really, really, really old. And the whole movie is super high concept. It's like full of just mind-bending reveal after mind-bending reveal, but it's all set in his living room as his friends come over and try to confront him and say, like, why are you moving? And he tells them this long story. And so that one, it's not a perfect movie, but I thought in terms of getting the biggest possible idea into the smallest amount of space, it's really marvelous. Another one I'll briefly mention I love is called The Battery, and it was a horror movie. It's a zombie flick, but it's just, two guys who were minor league baseball players. There's like a pitcher and a catcher on a minor league baseball team when the zombie apocalypse happened, and they don't really like each other, but they were on the same team, and now they're kind of trapped in the woods while trying to dodge zombies. And I thought it was really a marvelous, super low budget, well done zombie movie. So yeah, I love those kinds of stories.
Yeah. Okay. Well, perfect. Well, I'll try and track down the 10,000-Year-Old Man and put that in the show notes. But definitely The Battery. I'll try and check that one out. So let's talk about the writing of Empathy Inc. Just some quick questions to start. Where do you typically write? Are you write in your home office? You go down to Starbucks where there's people mingling around? What is your sort of standard setup?
I can write in a cafe or at home. I usually just get up in the morning really early and write like until lunch, and then I'll eat. And if I have nothing to do, that's my day. And I'd love to go to a coffee shop every day, but it's too expensive, so I'll write at home. And it does. I don't care where I am as long as I have a laptop and coffee. That's all I need.
Gotcha. When do you typically write? Sounds like you just write in the morning. If you have a day off, can you do 12, 15, 16-hour stretches of writing? Is there a point where the productivity starts to go down for you?
Yeah, it goes down pretty quick. The mornings are my best time, and so I'll write all morning until I'm completely burnt out and my brain can't look at a screen anymore. And so then I'll eat lunch and exercise or garden or run errands or whatever. I'll come back to it late afternoon, and at that point I'm running at about 50% efficiency. So I'll go for like an hour or two, unless I have a big deadline or there's something really exciting happening and I want to push through, but usually it's just a morning.
Yeah. So how much time do you spend outlining versus actually in final draft writing scene descriptions and dialogue?
Well, I've only made 2 features, and these are 2 features that I wrote and then helped produce. And it's really just dependent on my team. And as I feel like I could be many different kinds of writers, but in my limited experience, we outline the shit out of something because we don't have any resources, and we need to really, 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 really know we're going to have a high confidence when we start to write the script. So we outlined for a long time, and with Empathy, for example, we probably outlined for I don't know, anywhere from 4 to 6 months. I can't remember. Then we finally sat down in the same room and we're opening final draft to write the first real draft, and that probably took like a week to get one draft. And then
so
the second draft was
two.
It was like 2 weeks, and we had a draft that we could send out to potential investors and actors or whatever.
Yeah. But it's because you had spent so much time with the outline that you were really prepared going into
Totally.
it.
It was very elaborate.
And so what does the outlining step look like? You're sitting in the same room with the director, you're putting index cards on a cork board. What does it actually look like?
Well, we don't live in the same place, so usually the outline is, step one is we'll have, a 1-paragraph summary of the whole movie that we both agreed is tight. I'll write, a 1-pager, and then I'll show it to Yedidia, the director, and he'll give me notes, and then I'll write a 10-pager, and then I'll write a 40-pager, and it just keeps building out with more and more detail. And every time there's a new draft, he's giving me tons of notes and like, this doesn't make sense. This is too long. This is too short. And sometimes I'll be like, you do the next draft. I'm sort of in control of the drafting process as the writer, but he's very much involved. And so by the time we sit down, we've argued about everything usually.
So let's talk about that for just a minute, because I think this is another thing that I think screenwriters are ill prepared for as they actually become professionals. How do you handle those moments where you don't see eye to eye with the director? Is there a way of having? Do you have it sounds like you have this producer Josh. Maybe he's the the vote that changes things. But how do you get past those moments where you just don't see eye to eye on something?
Well, in one sense, we're very lucky because we're the only people we've ever made stuff with, this director and I. So ultimately, we're really close friends too. So I really trust him, and if he's really adamant about something, I just decide like, okay, I don't agree, but am I going to trust him? And I'm just going to trust that he's right on this point. And I've had to make those decisions sometimes, and it's really painful for me as an egomaniac who wants to control everything. But it's usually paid off. But I don't give in very easily. I will argue every single, I go into full lawyer mode. Here are my 18 bullet points why I'm right and you're wrong. And he'll listen to all of them and rebut as many of them as he can. And usually one of us is swayed. But I think what allows us to go into detail and really argue without any kind of personal feelings getting involved is that we are friends. And another advantage I think that we have is we both have lives outside of making a film, and we have careers outside of that. And ultimately, we don't have to make another movie or if we don't make another movie, it's not the end of the world. So we really are choosing to do this because we like to hang out and we like to do it. And I would imagine if this was your career, I don't really have any experience, if someone's writing me checks and is giving me terrible notes at the same time they write checks to me, I don't know what to do with that because I've never been paid like that,
Yeah. I gotcha. So, okay, so you guys, you had a script that you like after 2 weeks. What were the next steps to actually raising money? Is that more of Josh's part? You give the script to him, and then he goes out and tries to raise money. But maybe you can just give us kind of an overview of what does that look like for a couple guys. You're living on the East Coast. How do you go out and raise money for something like this when you don't have a long track record as filmmakers?
So our ability to raise money is very dependent on our circle of friends and friends of friends and, people who we know. Now, Yedidia, the director, he lives in New York, and Josh, the producer, used to live in New York. So they kind of had more access to some film adjacent or film friendly people there who they knew through family or friends. And we just reach out to people, and it was always like, let's first estimate how much money we could raise if we had a really great product or pitch, or something to interest people. And whatever that is, that's our budget. So if we can't write into that budget, we're never gonna, we are not in the business of going out and finding, quote, smart money or real money and waiting for that to come in before we make something. We were always like, someone has made a movie for $7,000 before. Someone has made a movie for $20,000 before. Well, why not us? So we wait around until we have an idea that we think is executable, given what we can raise, and then we just start asking people and showing them the script. And it's still a waiting process. And sometimes we come in under what we thought, and sometimes we have come in over what we thought. Mm-hmm. But Josh, the producer, he's not as much of the fundraising type of producer. He's more of the project manager. Once we've got funding, he becomes our kind of like foundation of the show.
I gotcha. So what's next for you? What are you guys working on now?
We have a couple basically finished scripts that we've been doing because we have so few resources. We finished shooting Empathy a long time ago, and it took us, over a year to edit. And basically, time was our resource, so we were very patient, and we took a lot of time, and now it's finally coming out. But in that time, we've also been brainstorming and outlining, and we've got a good solid genre idea, and we've got a kind of these are not pitchable, so please don't ask me what the log lines are. And we've also got a kind of a low budget drama we could do if we ever got a good actor. We might be able to, if we got a famous person who liked the script, we could do. So we've got some options, and we're very genre agnostic. We love sci-fi because we just made a sci-fi movie, but we pitch each other all kinds of stories, and we're happy to do anything that would work within our constraints.
I got you. Perfect. How did you guys find a distributor for Empathy Inc.? Did you go to film festivals? Did you just submit to them directly? Did you have some personal connections?
We submitted to some festivals. We submitted to some genre festivals. We submitted, especially the most important, perhaps one that we submitted to was Cinepocalypse in Chicago, and that's a genre festival that is kind of new and exciting, but fairly fun. And through that, we got in. They really loved our movie. We didn't know that. We didn't know if anyone was going to like it. And through that, we found a sales agent. And then we continued to show at certain festivals, but our sales agent was kind of working the rest of those festivals to help us. And he hooked us up with our distributor. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Perfect. How can people see Empathy Inc.? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like?
Well, today is it's August 29th, and on Friday, September 6th, it'll play at the Laemmle Theater in Glendale.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Laemmle's in Glendale. Sure.
Laemmle. I don't know.
No, it's a I think it's a LA thing. Yeah, the Laemmle's.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it's going to open there on the 6th, Friday, on the 6th of September, and then a week later it'll be in Philly, Columbus, Ohio, Brooklyn, maybe some other places. And then at the end of the month, maybe 2 weeks after that, it'll be online, Amazon, iTunes probably, or whatever it is.
Okay. Perfect. So what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will round up for the show notes.
Well, my Twitter is my name, and that's Mark Leidner. And our movie, we'll post updates to all the great reviews we are actually getting, and release information about the movie at if you just Google Empathy Inc. Film. I think it's Empathy Inc. Film. It might be Empathy Inc. Movie. I should know that. I run those accounts.
No worries. I'll find it and I'll put it in the show notes so people can just click over to it.
Thanks a lot.
Well, Mark, I appreciate this. This sounds like a cool film, and I wish you all the world with it. I hope it does really great, and I look forward to talking to you again with your next film.
Thank you, Ashley. I enjoy your show.
Hey, well, thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye. I just want to talk quickly about SYS Select. It's a service for screenwriters to help them sell their screenplays and get writing assignments. The first part of the service is the SYS Select Screenplay Database. Screenwriters upload their screenplays along with a logline, synopsis, and other pertinent information like budget and genre, and then producers search for and hopefully find screenplays they want to produce. Dozens of producers are in the system looking for screenplays right now. There have been a number of success stories come out of the service. You can find out about all the SYS Select successes by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/success. Also on SYS podcast episode 222, I talked with Steve Deering, who was the first official success story to come out of the SYS Select database. When you join SYS Select, you get access to the screenplay database along with all the other services that we're providing to SYS Select members. These services include the newsletter. This monthly newsletter goes out to a list of over 400 producers who are actively seeking writers and screenplays. Each SYS Select member can pitch one screenplay in this monthly newsletter. We also provide screenwriting leads. We have partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads services, so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, we've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These leads run the gamut. There's producers looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. They're looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots, all types of projects. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. Also, you get access to the SYS Select forum, where we will help you with your logline and query letter and answer any screenwriting related questions that you might have. We also have a number of screenwriting classes that are recorded and available in the SYS Select forum. These are all the classes that I've done over the years, so you'll have access to those whenever you want once you join. The classes cover every part of writing your screenplay, from concept to outlining to the first act, second act, third act, as well as other topics like writing short films and pitching your projects in person. Once again, if this sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, please go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that is sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer-director duo Scott Beck and Brian Woods. They wrote the hugely successful film A Quiet Place, which is actually available right now through Amazon Prime if you haven't seen it. It's a well-done film, definitely worth checking out. Brian and Scott are back with a new film called Haunt, so we dig into that film, how that all came about, as well as talking specifically about A Quiet Place and kind of how their career got started and led up to that point. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Mark. Lots of interesting things were discussed in this interview. I thought it was interesting how Mark wanted to get his director excited, so he built the sci-fi story, which was what he was interested in, but then also incorporated this business setting that he knew the director liked. Film is so much about collaboration. It's so important to keep everyone involved, everyone engaged, everyone excited about the project, especially the director, but especially on a low-budget film like this. It's going to take a lot of work. There's not going to be a lot of money involved, so it's all about the passion and just being in love with this project. So really being thoughtful about that stuff is worth really considering. And again, just at all levels of your career, you've got to be self-aware and sort of understand who else is going to collaborate on this project and how are you going to get them excited about it. In general, I think this is a great attitude to have if you want to be a writer and not a director, especially if you want to be a writer and not a director. As screenwriters, unless you want to direct, the film is never going to be your vision. It's going to be put through a meat grinder with director, with actors, with producers, potentially a studio, financiers. There's just going to be a lot of people that are kind of pushing this around, trying to get their 2 cents in. That's just how it works. I mean, it's collaboration. There's a lot of money involved when you kind of go upscale a little bit, and the more people are involved, the more money, just the more process and bureaucracy becomes attached to these projects. So being aware early in the process and making sure that you're giving the director something that he's invested in means you'll have an early ally to help you realize as much of your vision as possible as it goes through this meat grinder.
even a low budget film like this, where there's not a studio or development executive giving notes, there's going to be lots of compromises, with actors, with locations, with props, with costumes, ultimately just with the budget and not being able to afford everything you want for the production. So again, just having a good attitude where you realize this is a collaborative medium and you make an effort to work within the constraints you have, and making an effort to keep everybody engaged, everybody on the production interested and engaged. It's just going to make the whole process a lot easier. You're going to be happier. You're going to get more of your vision ultimately in that finished product. These business lessons are also, I feel, very valuable. Listen to what he said about the comedy with no cast. It's just not something that you can actually sell unless you capture lightning in a bottle. Of course, there are exceptions to this. Of course, there are low-budget comedies that went on to do really well, whether it be film festivals, they found a distributor and stuff. So of course there are exceptions, but think about this. You never heard of the comedy film that he did because it didn't get a distributor. And so, there are some shining examples of comedies with no cast making a big name for themselves, but those are really the exceptions. And the thing is we don't hear about the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of films that get made that don't get distribution. And here's a prime example. His previous film did not find distribution. It was exactly what he's saying, is that he would find distributors that simply didn't want to do it simply because there was no cast. So again, really think these things through. Last week I had talked to the director of Ode to Joy. Go and have a look at that film. That is a comedy, but there actually is some cast. Certainly it's not a big studio film. It's not a $50 million studio film, but that film Ode to Joy did have some cast, and that's what a film like that needs to kind of get distribution, to kind of make it into these various distribution platforms. It might feel like I'm recommending making all sorts of artistic compromises here, but that's really not what I'm doing. And I think Mark is a great example of that. He didn't just write something that he thought he could sell. He wrote something that he and the director were both excited about, and they thought that they could potentially sell it. Maximizing the potential of the product, but also doing something that is creatively fulfilling. I think that's a great lesson, and I think that's what really we should all be striving to do. This idea of sort of creating something in a vacuum without keeping some of these business decisions in mind, I just think is a recipe for disaster. Because you're going to need a few films. Like, you're probably going to need to make a few shorts. You may need to make a few feature films. You may need to sell a few scripts. And I would really kind of include myself in that. The first few scripts that I sold, Dish Dogs is a prime example of that. It really got rewritten a lot. It got changed a lot. And I think part of that was the fact that me and the other writer, we didn't consider this sort of, and I'm saying meat grinder, and that's kind of sort of very negative connotations, but that's kind of what it is. We didn't sort of consider this meat grinder that we were going to have to go through. And so what happened was the director and the producers, and potentially maybe even some of the actors, they went and they started to rewrite our script. But if we had been a little bit more conscientious early on in the process, we might have been able to avoid some of that. It's hard to explain, again, until you've kind of gone through it, but I just really liked Mark's attitude here. It's one of compromise. It's one of being reasonable, and not just all about his artistic vision. I want to see my artistic vision. There is some compromises that ultimately we have to make if we want to be successful in this business. But again, we're doing this as a sort of a creative pursuit. So keeping in mind that creative fulfillment is also a big part of that, and just understanding all of these various inputs, putting them, in their proper place, but still, considering them. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.